with our webinar today. And I'm going to switch over really quickly to our main area here. And thank you all for providing that information. We appreciate you. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and start again with today's webinar. And again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining, and a good afternoon to you all in the virtual room here today. And welcome to today's grant solicitation webinar, the OJJDP FY 2020 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescents, Sex Offenders, and Children with Sexual Behavior Problems Solicitation. My name is William Moore, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical. Again, apologies there for the audio sound, but no worries. We prepared for this due to heavy influx of usage of conference call lines. We prepared for our audio difficulties that we may have today, but no worries. We will make sure that we are indeed connected and we have a plan B. So I do apologize for that brief interruption. But I'll go ahead and just begin where we left off, but letting everyone know that this is indeed the FY 2020 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Children with Sexual Behavior Problems Solicitation webinar. Again, my name is William Moore, and I'm with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And as your technical host, I wanted to take a couple of seconds just to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect platform that we will utilize today, and to provide a few announcements. One of those announcements is that please note that this event is being recorded, and our webinar will be linked to our YouTube page. Again, past webinars are archived on our YouTube page, and if you all could, you can please take a moment to view them on our YouTube page that is linked here. If you would like any transcript or supporting materials, that can also be accessed through the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of important documents and resources related to today's webinar, you may do so by locating the Handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you would also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. You will simply click on the name of the file and then click the download button. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a Q&A session where the presenter will address some of the questions posed during the presentation. Please type in your questions into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. If you're viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, please go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Again, if you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. All right, and with that being said, again, apologies for the brief audio disconnect there. However, we do have contingency plans in place. But I will now turn it over to our presenter for today, Ms. Cynthia Pappas, who will provide today's webinar solicitation. Cindy, take it away.
Great. Thank you, William. Again, my name is Cindy Pappas. I am a Senior Policy Advisor with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention within the Special Victims and Violent Offenders Division. And I will be managing this program, the OJJDP FY 20, supporting effective interventions for adolescent sex offenders and children with sexual behavior problems. But before I begin, I really want to extend my sincere gratitude for all of you for joining this call today. We're looking at over now almost 170 participants, and for taking time out of your busy schedules and in these uncertain times for you to choose to show up here today. It really is a testament to your dedication to the clients and the communities that you're serving, including the children, the victims, the families, and the caregivers in need of these unique services. So I applaud you and I thank you for all the work that you do, and I pray that you are all healthy and safe and remember the importance of self-care always, particularly in this field and especially during these times. So with that, I'll get back to our regularly scheduled programs, but I certainly wanted to acknowledge you all for what you do and for where we are kind of in our world right now. So to get us started, a little background about our office. If you're not familiar, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and as you can see, we are the federal government and it's a lot of alphabet soup. So I'll go through this just to give you an understanding. There won't be a quiz on this at the end, I promise, but OJJDP is a component of the Office of Justice Programs within the U.S. Department of Justice. So OJP is an umbrella of our program offices, which includes, from the left, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institute of Justice, the Office for Victims of Crime, OJJDP, and the Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking, also known as the SMART Office. And I'm getting a notice that my battery is running low, which is causing me to panic. Stand by. There we go. Okay, so at OJJDP, we envision a nation where our children are free from crime and violence, and if they come into contact with the justice system, that contact should both be just and beneficial to them. By supporting states, local communities, and tribal jurisdictions in your efforts to develop and implement effective programs for juveniles, our office strives to strengthen the juvenile justice system's effort to protect public safety, hold offenders accountable, and provide services that address the needs of youth and their families. So clearly, this program addresses every bit of our mission. During today's webinar, I'll provide an overview of the FY 20 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Youth and Children with Sexual Behavior Problems Funding Opportunity. Again, this is not a primer on this issue. This is really about how you can apply for this funding. I'll briefly review the solicitation requirements and I'll highlight the resources and tools available to help you in what can seem like a pretty monstrous process in applying for our grant, but once we break it down and go through the application process, you should have a better understanding. There will be time, as William mentioned, for a few questions at the end of the presentation, but please note there was contact information for if you have additional questions that you can have those addressed throughout the entire time that you are developing the solicitation. So someone will be available, the response center is available to answer any questions that you might have that are not addressed either today or as you're filling out the application. So this is the solicitation. I've provided the link. It's also in the handouts pod. If you haven't downloaded it yet, I suggest that you try to do so. I'll be walking through the solicitation today. It's nice to have it in front of you as we're going through it. And the dates to remember, the number one date is that April 14th. So that's when it's due. And no later than 11:59 p.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time. So April 14th, mark your calendars. We do strongly suggest that you not wait until that 11th hour It's really recommended to try to get these in within 72 hours in advance of the closing, as if there's any technological issues, as you're seeing, we've had a couple already today, it can happen. It's just reality. So try to get those in earlier than that last day, just to make sure you're not dealing with any glitches. This is an open, competitive solicitation, and eligible applicants are limited, and it's pretty open, as you can see, to states, including territories, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and institutions of higher education. So the applicant, what's important to remember, must be the entity that would have primary responsibility. So if there are multiple partners, the applicant that is applying will have a responsibility for carrying out the award, including administering the funding and managing the entire program. We received a couple questions in advance regarding eligibility. Again, it's broken out here, but one of the questions was if you were a past grantee, yes, you can apply for this funding if you've received this in the past. So hopefully that answers one of our questions going forward, but certainly here to answer more as we go throughout. So we are seeking from applicant agencies to provide a continuum of intervention and supervision services to children with sexual behavior problems and for adolescent sex offenders, as well as treatment services for their victims and families or caregivers. So under this initiative, what we are seeking, a successful applicant will have an established multidisciplinary team that supports a comprehensive, holistic approach to treating adolescents who commit sex crimes and children with sexual behavior problems, as well as provide services to victims and family and caregivers. I'm going to get into a little more detail as far as what we are looking at as far as those definitions, as well as what we're talking about specifically for the multidisciplinary team in a few moments. Actually, right now. So in thinking about the work that you do and the clients that you serve, for the purposes of this solicitation, OJJDP defines children with sexual behavior problems as youth 12 and younger who are pre- or post-adjudication status for inappropriate sexual behavior, and this can be with a family member, co-resident, or other non-family peer-age child, friend, neighbor, classmate. OJJDP through this solicitation defines adolescent sex offenders as youth aged 13 to 17 who are in pre- or post-adjudication status for serious sexual offenses committed against family members or other non-family peer-age children, again, friends, neighbors, classmates, or adults. We are expecting to make up to 7 awards, so this is the largest number of funding, or largest amount of funding that we've had since we've opened this program. We've averaged around 3 per year when this solicitation has been open in the past, so we are awarding up to 7 this year. Each award up to $475,000 each for a 3-year project period. And that project period will start in October 1st, 2020. So this is really important as you're thinking about this and as you're developing your budgets to submit. This is up to $475,000. So what your request from the federal government should not be more than that, and that amount should be budgeted across those 36 months, those 3 years. So it is a one-time award up to $475,000 for a 3-year project period. In this program, again, the goals and objectives, we are looking to assist communities, your efforts in developing comprehensive multidisciplinary approaches to provide a continuum of intervention and supervision services for adolescent sex offenders as well as children with sexual behavior problems as defined earlier, as well as treatment services for their victims and family and caregivers. The goal is to prevent sexual reoffending by adolescent sex offenders and children with sexual behavior problems, and to promote healing, as well as provide services for victims and families. So as I mentioned, we are really prioritizing the multidisciplinary team. Applicants with this team will receive priority consideration. And if you have that, it should be as a separate attachment labeled Multidisciplinary Team Partner List as part of your application. And this can include, but is certainly not limited to, prosecutors, child welfare personnel, juvenile justice personnel, including probation and juvenile court, mental health service providers, victim advocates, law enforcement, and community support providers. So all of these can be included, should be included and considered within your multidisciplinary teams. And again, including that as a separate attachment, multidisciplinary team partner list, and that list should reference the lead agency. The lead agency is the one submitting the application. A quick question here, and I'll address it as we just went through the earlier side about eligibility. Yes, if you're receiving any for-profit organization must forego any management fee as it relates to this funding project. So anything that's funded with federal dollars cannot receive a management fee. And the award does not have to be equally divided between the 3 years. We know in some years you might need more money to ramp up the expenses. So no, it doesn't have to be an equal amount across those 3 years, but do be thoughtful about what your budget would look like, what you plan to do with this funding across those 3 years. But no, it does not have to be equally divided. A key consideration for all of OJJDP programs are that that public safety should be balanced with prevention, early intervention, and treatment. So we are asking that you describe within your narrative how you will ensure public safety. For example, individualized supervision and safety plans for those in treatment as part of any proposed strategy to be funded. So again, a balance of public safety with prevention, early intervention, and treatment. And we do expect you to work closely with our currently funded training and technical assistance provider, who is absolutely fabulous, the University of Oklahoma Sciences Center. And successful applicants will not only be working with the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, you will also have the opportunity and will be expected to participate in an up to 3-day cross-site grantee meeting. So they host these meetings once a year and bring together, so within your budget, do plan to send up to 3 representatives from your agency or from your multidisciplinary team to participate in these cross-site trainings. So budget that across all 3 years. And I'll cover that again in the budget when we talk more specifically about the budget, but that is an important consideration as you are thinking about funds and where you'll be spending them. So additional resources, these are all within the solicitation, and if you're not familiar, whether it's this program or any other, these are some truly fabulous resources that we have available. The OJJDP Model Program Guides contain information about evidence-based juvenile justice and youth prevention, intervention, and reentry programs. It's an amazing resource for practitioners and communities about what works, what's promising, and what doesn't work. And I think those are really great lessons for us to learn too. It's wonderful to know what works in the community, but boy, if we can learn from those that have tried and it didn't quite work, those are also things that we might want to know. Again, this is not this program specific. There's information about these issues, but across all juvenile justice and youth prevention, intervention, and reentry programs. For all of your work within juvenile justice, delinquency prevention, and child protection and safety. OJPCrimeSolution.gov. This is it's rigorous research to inform practitioners and policymakers about, again, what works and what doesn't in criminal justice, juvenile justice, and crime victim services. If you're in this field, my guess is that you are familiar, but if you're not, I would absolutely bookmark ncsby.org. This is the National Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth. And this is part of the Center on Child Abuse and Neglect in the Department of Pediatrics of the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences. This is the OJJDP TTA grantee for this work, and the resources are fantastic. There's a curriculum, a catalog, assessment instruments, registration information by state, and fact sheets. So if you're not familiar with the National Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth, please do look at the resources that they have available. And if you are selected to be a grantee, if your solicitation is selected, or your application for this solicitation is selected, you will become intimately involved with their work as you'll be working directly with them. And then finally, another resource is our family justice centers around the country offer a wide range of services and support for both adult victims and their children, including direct links to child advocacy centers for children who have witnessed or who are directly experiencing violence in their homes. So again, just additional resources that you should have for this, as well as all of your efforts within this area. Okay, so now that hopefully everyone has a better understanding about the requirements for this program, I'm going to dive into the process of submitting an application, which can feel heavy. It's a lot of information, but as you go through the solicitation, there are links, there are contact numbers, the response center, GMS help desk, there are all of resources to help you through this process. So I'm thrilled that you are all on here. We're now at over 180 attendees, just to get an understanding that you're thinking about this now well before the due date. Because it can be a process in trying to understand every form that you need. I'll run through it briefly now, but again, as you have questions throughout the application process, do not hesitate to reach out to the response center. That is why they are here, and they are fabulous. Everything that should be included. This is there's also a link in the solicitation for the grant application resource guide, which walks you through all of these forms, all of the information, and everything that you need to do to submit. But again, I'm going to give you a brief overview now. So the SF424, this is our required standard form. It's a cover sheet that we use for all submissions of pre-applications, applications, and related. And it's completed through Grants.gov. It includes basic information, your contact, the title of your project, and the amount of funding requested. So that's our standard form, and the link will be in the solicitations for that. With each application, please include an abstract. This is not included in the program narrative. There's a 30-page requirement for, or maximum for that. This is not included in that limit. So the abstract should briefly, 400 words or less, just describe your project's purpose, the populations to be served, the activities that the applicant will implement to achieve the project's goals and objectives. So a question just came in as I'm going through exactly the activities and the population to be served. No, the question is, does the proposed program need to serve a minimum number of youth? It does not. There is no specified number. We would ask that you indicate the youth that you plan to serve, and with justifications to that, but we are not prescribing a number to be served. So back to the abstract, this should be included as a separate attachment, single space, 12-point font with 1-inch margins. I know it sounds a little tedious, and as we get into the project narrative, the specifications, but this is very competitive, and it helps to keep similar formats as we're receiving the application, so that's why we keep these, the formats the same. So single space, 12-point font, 1-inch margins for the project abstract. And again, will not count against the page limit for the program narrative, which I will get into now. And narrative, the program narrative that presents a detailed description of the purpose, the goals, the strategies, design, and management of the program. This is going to take up the most amount of your time and thought, and really, really want you to be thoughtful in designing and helping us see. We're not there. We're not in the field. We're not doing the work that you're doing. Explain it to us in a way that we can fully get a grasp of what you're doing, the goals and objectives, and how we can assist in filling those gaps. There is, once again, restrictions on how it should look, double-spaced, 1-inch margins not exceeding 30 pages, and use 12-point standard font, preferably Times New Roman. You may provide, and we ask that you provide, references, and that can be as a separate attachment that will not count towards the 30-page program narrative limit. Again, doesn't mean that you'll be kicked out necessarily within, without following the length restrictions or the margins, but we will consider such non-compliance in the peer review and when we're making the final award decisions. Again, this is very competitive, so please do follow those to the extent that you can. Continue on with the program narrative. Again, the project design and implementation. Briefly describe the nature and scope that you are addressing. Adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, the victim services you're providing, your training needs. Please use data to provide evidence that this problem does exist. Demonstrate the size and scope of the problem and the effects of the problem on the target population as well as the larger community. Any data or research referenced should include information about the source of the data, so please do cite your sources and describe any research or evaluation studies that relate to the problem and contribute to your understanding of its causes and potential solutions. In the capabilities and competencies, we are asking that you detail how this project will operate throughout the funding period and describe the strategies that you'll use to achieve the goals and objectives. This section should include, I skipped one, didn't I? Apologies. Apologies. So the capabilities and competencies should detail the applicant organization and any contractors, if you're going to have any subgrantees that you'll use to implement and manage this effort. They should all be listed here. Highlight any previous experience implementing projects of similar design or magnitude. Describe the roles and responsibilities of project staff and explain the program's organizational structure and operations. Please include here, and this is as a separate attachment, your organizational chart showing how your organization operates, including who will manage the finances, how the organization manages subawards, if there will be any. So if you'll be using any of these funds to make subawards, subcontracts, so who will be managing those, and the management of the proposed project for funding. So there may be a program director, a program manager, someone responsible for the finances. So please detail all of those, as well as anyone within your multidisciplinary team and their roles and responsibilities. This is detailed in the plan for collecting the data requirements. Actually, I have more information on the next slide. Sorry, there's a bit of a pause. So the application should demonstrate how you understand your understanding of the performance data reporting requirements. So let me make this really clear. You do not have to submit performance data because nothing's been funded as of yet, but that you understand that if you are funded, that you will be expected to submit this information, that you understand that we will be requiring data from you should you receive funding. And then if you go onto the performance measurements page at the link provided, OJP.gov/performance, you'll have an understanding of what data we will be collecting for our performance measures. Again, you do not need to submit data. Just indicate in writing briefly that you have an understanding that we will be collecting data on your performance, and that you understand that that will be a required reporting process if funded. The organizational chart and the project timeline do not count for the 30-page limit for the narrative. As a question just came in, I'm going to try to get through some of them as we're going through. But no, the 30-page really is the narrative, and then the attachments can be org chart and timeline. And the narrative must be double-spaced. So the budget narrative should be used. There's an Excel version of OJP's budget detail worksheet within the solicitation. We ask that you use that when you're completing the proposed budget for the application, and it should be a thorough and clear description of every cost listed in the narrative. So within the budget detail worksheet, there is a section where you put in the amounts, and then under each section you'll see a narrative, a space to type in your narrative. So those two should correlate. What you're putting in for travel, there should be an explanation of what that travel is. And as I jump into travel, remember to please budget up for 3 personnel to travel to the Training and Technical Assistance Cross-Site Grantee meeting each year of the award. We don't know where those meetings will be every year, so use a general estimate, and you can get on gsa.gov for per diem rates across the country to get a sense of meals, entertainment, meals and travel and lodging costs that we would find. And for more information on this is our application resource guide, which is linked throughout the entire solicitation. In addition to everything I just covered, that's really the bulk of your application. Additional information that we do require as appropriate, I listed them all here, and they're all linked in the solicitation. I'm going to briefly describe each of these now. If they relate to you, certainly make a note of that and make sure to submit. For example, the indirect cost rate, if you are budgeting for indirect costs, you will be required to have a current, and that means unexpired, federally approved indirect cost rate agreement attached to the application. The tribal authorizing resolution, if applicable, a tribe, tribal organization, or third party that proposes to provide direct services or assistance to residents on tribal lands should include in its application a resolution, letter, affidavit, or other documentation as appropriate that demonstrates that the applicant has the requisite authorization from the tribe or tribes to implement the proposed project on tribal lands. The Financial Management and System of Internal Controls questionnaire that is required for all applicants. Every OJP applicant must also submit the Financial Management and Systems of Internal Controls questionnaire. I just went through that. Oh, and I'm sorry, the disclosure of lobbying is required by all OJP applicants as well. So the Financial Management questionnaire and the disclosure of lobbying activities is a requirement for all. Even if you do not plan to expend any funds, you're not expending any funds for lobbying activities, please do still submit the lobbying disclosure of lobbying activities and enter NA or no, not applicable in the text boxes for item 10. Again, all of this is listed out in the forms, but that is one that even though you're like, oh, I'm not doing anything with lobbying, still please do submit that form so that we know that you saw and that you are not expending any funds for lobbying activities. Each applicant is to disclose whether you or any of your subrecipients or any, have any pending applications for federally funded grants or cooperative agreements that include requests for funding the same type of project being proposed in this application, or would cover any identical cost items. So we really want to make sure across our sister agencies, or even within our own, that we're not duplicating funding, we're not duplicating efforts. So we ask that you disclose any pending applications, even if you think that it may not be the same. It's best to disclose it to us so that we can determine if those costs would be duplicative. Thank you. An applicant that's designated as DOJ high risk is to also please submit as a separate attachment to your application that you are as such. So information, we'll use this among other pertinent information to determine if we'll consider or select for an award under this solicitation. But if you are high risk grantee, and you will know if you are, please do submit that designation as well as a separate attachment. If you're proposing any research, this is not a research award, so that would be not necessarily pertinent or relevant, but if you would like to propose research, including research and development and or evaluation, please demonstrate your independence and integrity to include appropriate safeguards before, this would be before you were to receive any funding. So the research and evaluation independence and integrity form is also linked in the solicitation. There's guidance on how to fill that out as well. And last but not least, disclosure of executive compensation. This is specifically for nonprofit organizations. You may be required to make certain disclosures relating to the processes you use to determine the compensation of your officers, directors, trustees, and key employees. The link in the solicitation goes directly to all of the guidance to determine whether or not that would be something that you would be required, and it really is dependent on how you read and answer the questions and understand the disclosure of executive compensation as it relates to how you fund your executive officers. Okay, that's a lot of information. I'm going to take a deep breath and a quick sip of tea. Priority areas. So you're going to see this within the solicitation as well. And last year, the one area was especially new, the qualified opportunity zone. So I did want to take just a few minutes and make sure that you saw these, that you're aware of them, and if they apply to you, to please make sure that you note them within your applications, because we will be giving priority considerations to those that fall under these three categories. So the first is priority consideration in award decisions that address specific challenges that rural communities face. So if you're an applicant proposing to receive priority consideration under rural priority, I ask that you please provide sufficient narrative to include what makes the geographic services area rural. So go into the U.S. Census or other appropriate government data to describe why your area is rural, how the isolated area is in need of services, and how you will address specific challenges in rural communities. The second priority area is under the high poverty area or persistent poverty counties. If you are seeking funding, you should provide, under this priority area, please provide a sufficient narrative to explain each specific high poverty area. And once again, looking at census tract numbers, or each specific persistent poverty county where individuals that you are serving will be live and reside. So those who will benefit from this funding and how this funding will address the specific challenges in each of the identified area or county that is considered high poverty area or persistent poverty county. And finally, the third OJP priority area is under the qualified opportunity zone. The QOZ priority should provide sufficient narrative in explaining clearly the public safety benefit that you anticipate that your project will have on a specific qualified opportunity zone. And the narrative and list of effective zones, and once again by census tract number, must be included as an attachment that is clearly labeled as addressing these zones. So then all these links, that's going to take you into looking in each of your zones. If you fall within AQOZ, it will be noted on the census data, and then add that to your application, and that will also lift you up for priority consideration. Just doing a collective pause because I know this is a tremendous amount of information. Even as I'm saying it, it is a lot to take in. So I appreciate your patience with this. Applicants must register with Grants.gov prior to submitting an application. I'll say it again. Please make sure that you register with Grants.gov prior to submitting. These are, once again, are due by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time, PM on April 14th, 2020. To be considered timely, it must be submitted by this deadline using Grants.gov. And you must have received a validation message from Grants.gov that indicates successful and timely submission. And that's really, as I mentioned in the beginning, the importance of trying to submit at least 72 hours prior to the application due date, just in case there are any glitches, any concerns, anything that you might have missed in your application. This will give you time to redo and give you time to get it in prior to the application due date. We also encourage you to sign up for Grants.gov email notifications regarding this solicitation. So if it's modified, which can happen, individuals who sign up with Grants.gov for updates will automatically be notified. I see there's many questions coming in. We received many questions in advance as well. I'm going to try to get through those in the time that we have in just a few moments. But again, if there's any questions that you have, the Response Center is fabulous and responsive. Their number's here. Their email is here. Their hours are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard on the solicitation close date, which is April 14th. So have that number at the ready as you're going through it. I'm certain there will be questions, and questions are great. Please reach out to us with those so that you can submit the best application you can. If you have glitches or questions or concerns with Grants.gov, again, this is where you'll be submitting all of this information. The customer service hotline is here. This is the number, the website, the email, and they are 24/7, except on federal holidays. So anytime, if you have an issue, if you can't sleep tonight and you're up at 3 a.m. and you're going through this, they will be available to help. And they are truly fabulous to work with. They can answer any questions that you will have as it relates to technical assistance with Grants.gov. So a lot of information. I know we have a few questions, quite a few questions coming in. I know we had I think William has a couple for me already queued up, but I will turn it over to him at this time.
Yes, thanks, Cindy. So yes, we do receive a lot of questions from registrants about specific program implementation strategies. For example, tips to encourage parents, the use of polygraphs with treatment services, best practices for statewide approaches to address problematic sexual behavior, just to name a few. I just wanted to open up our Q&A portion by giving you an opportunity to address some of these questions.
Got it. Thank you, William. I see that, and I actually reviewed, many of you put in questions as you registered. Thank you for that. That really helps us kind of set our mindset as we're going into this, and also how we can do a better job in the future in really educating registrants on what these webinars are all about. So I appreciate that question, William, and I'm also seeing some of these come in as far as what are the recommended intervention models and all of that. So the intent and purpose of the webinar really, and for those of you who really stuck with me through this 45 minutes, are clear that the purpose of the webinar is to provide information on the application process for this very competitive funding opportunity. Again, the grant funding is designed to support agencies as you are developing or enhancing your intervention and supervision services for adolescent sex offenders and children with sexual behavior problems, and to provide treatment services for their victims and support services for family and caregivers. So I hope that after learning more about this opportunity, those that have stayed with me, that you're clear, one, if you're eligible to apply, and two, if you are eligible, that you have a better understanding of the process of applying for a federal application through the Office of Justice Programs. However, I will give you all, as you're here, and this is also in the solicitation, I mentioned it in the resources, some of the best guidance that we have as far as effective programming can be found in the resources that I mentioned earlier. The OJJDP Model Program Guides that gives information about evidence-based juvenile justice and youth prevention, intervention, and reentry programs. So model program guides, number one place to start is as far as what's effective and not in this field. OJPCrimeSolutions.gov, again, another rigorous research to help inform practitioners and policymakers, you all, in what works and what doesn't. So going there, looking at the evidence-based programs under topical areas. This may be one in which you're working. We know you all wear many, many hats within our juvenile justice systems, and certainly your partners will be multidisciplinary teams. So please take those two resources and bookmark them, get into them, see what's out there as far as what works and what doesn't, what's evidence-based, and what's promising. And I cannot speak more highly of the National Center on Sexual Behavior of Youth. As I mentioned earlier, this is our training and technical assistance provider hosted by the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. They provide training. They have resources on their website, fact sheets, tip sheets, whether you're talking to parents that are dealing with this issue for the very first time, whether you are a service provider, school systems, whether you're treating children with sexual behavior problems or adolescent sex offenders, there is information, guidance, training, resources, contacts available on that website. So to address what can I recommend, because it is competitive, I can't say one thing specific, and we are asking you all to tell us what you're doing, what works, what doesn't, and what gaps can we help you fill. But I can point you to those resources because they are tremendous. I hope that answers some of the questions, William.
Yes. And just really quickly, Cindy, just based off of that information that you provided, could you please remind our audience and us who specifically is eligible for this funding?
Sure, absolutely. The following, per the solicitation, states and territories, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations, including tribal nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and institutions of higher education, including tribal institutions of higher education. So as I mentioned, or actually was asked throughout, for-profit organizations as well as other recipients must forego any profit or management fee. Doesn't mean outside of this funding they can't take fees, but with federal funding, programs that are supported with federal dollars, there cannot be income. And this is a question that came in when a couple applicants registered. And OJJP previous grantees apply, yes. You are all welcome to reapply for this funding.
And Cindy, are there examples of previously funded projects under this award?
Yes, if applicants go onto our website, you can see we've been funding this since 2010. So if you go back to under OJJDP.gov funding, you'll see everyone that we funded in the past. Last year we had enough funding to fund 3 program sites through this award, as well as our training and technical assistance provider, University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. So we only had, not only it's a tremendous impact, but we had funding for 4 awards, including the TTA provider last year, and this year we have enough funding for 7 sites, which again we have not funded more than 3 or 4 in the past solicitations, is my understanding. So that is exciting. It shows a need, and it shows the tremendous work that's happening in the field. But if you want to get a sense, we have information from the FY19 funding. So go to OJJDP.gov, look at under the funding tab. Under the funding, look at past funding, and you'll see all of the awards, and then you can link directly to each site that we funded, how they're using their funding. So that can give you a sense of, what have we funded in the past? What are the interventions that these sites have proposed? It might be a really good indication of things that we may or may not be looking for, as long as they translate into what works for your local community. And that is what we're looking for you to describe what you are seeing, how you're seeing it, what are the gaps, and how can we help in the best way to provide training, technical assistance, and additional resources to help meet those needs.
Cindy, will OJJDP offer this solicitation next year in fiscal year 2021?
Oh, I hope so. It's certainly, not that I'm allowed to say I have a favorite, but if I were, I do truly, I think this program is so important, and I enjoy working with everyone I'm involved with in it. But with that said, we simply don't know what the FY21 budget will include. It is, for those who are interested, whoever asked that question, for those interested in solicitations as they're coming out, it's often interesting to look at the OJP's Funding Resource Center, looking at our spend plan as it's being developed, and that is at ojp.gov /funding. William, I don't know, I can probably put that in the chat, if you wouldn't mind. It's ojp.gov /funding. Awesome, thank you. And that shows you just what our spend plan is for 2020, and then as it's developed for 2021, you'll see not only this, if it's refunded, if it's funded next year, but everything that we're doing. And there are really some fabulous programs coming, not just out of our office, but out of the entire Office of Justice programs.
So then, Cindy, in regards to funding and the dollar amount, is the funding $475,000 per year for 3 years, or $475,000 total over the 3 years?
Yes, and thank you again, and I know I iterated it earlier, but it is one of those things that can get a little bit confusing, and we often see kick really, really amazing program applications out because that people would apply for every year the full amount, and that's just not what this is. So thank you for asking the question again, and I will absolutely reiterate it. The total amount that you all can apply for is $475,000. That's the total over the 3 years. If you include in-kind, that amount can go, the total amount of your project may be more if you are putting in-kind resources, but the federal amount that you can receive, the maximum is $475,000. Again, it does not have to be equally divided over those 3 years. I want you to be thoughtful in your budget in what you think you might need year 1, 2, and 3, as long as the total does not go over that maximum amount.
And is there a match requirement for this funding, Cindy?
There is not a match. Some of OJP solicitations do require a match, but this one does not. You certainly can include a match, as I mentioned, if you'd like to include in kind. We're certainly are free to, but it is not required.
Okay, thank you. And how is youth defined for the purpose of this grant, Cindy? How would you define youth for the purpose of this particular grant?
So we are looking, as with all OJJDP programs, the target population is under the age of 18. And for the purposes of this solicitation, as it's noted in the solicitation, we are defining children with sexual behavior problems as youth 12 and younger. And adolescent sex offenders are defined as per the solicitation as youth age 13 to 17. So that's the delineation that we are looking at, and that's detailed within the solicitation as well. But it is not to serve over 18. One of the questions we often get, which I haven't seen yet, and I know that we will. So what if you are treating a youth who is 16 or 17 in a program, and throughout their program they age into 18 and they're still in the program? You do not have to kick them out by any means. So please note that if they start the program, your treatment program that is being funded by federal dollars, and they turn 18, they can remain within the program that they started.
Okay. Cindy, is a multidisciplinary team a requirement?
It's certainly high priority consideration and should be included as an attachment labeled multidisciplinary team partner list. We are really looking for applicants to come in with a multidisciplinary team that has past experience responding to adolescent sex offenders and children with sexual behavior problems. And there's a list of what that may include, but please think about what works best. Don't bring people to the table just to bring them to the table. Bring those that make the most sense. Prosecutors, child welfare personnel, juvenile justice personnel, including probation and juvenile court, mental health, victim advocates, law enforcement, community support providers, really thinking about the team that best supports the goals of your project.
Great. How will I be notified if my agency is selected to receive an award?
If you are selected as one of the lucky 7, you'll be notified by September 30th, 2020. Both the point of contact and the authorizing official, so whoever you list on the grant application will receive an email award notification, which will include further information on the procedures for how to receive the funds. And then if for those who are not selected, that date will be a little bit later because we'll put out notice to those that are, and then for whatever reason, if they decline, there may be other spots that are open. So those that are not selected will receive notification by October 30th, 2020. And it'll be the same email notification to the point of contact in the award. So William, I know that we are coming down to the last 2 minutes. I'm looking at some of the questions that we received. I think I addressed them all, but I also know you need to jump into your final closing remarks. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you. And then we have here up on the screen now, any questions that you have, contact the response center at the phone number provided or the email provided, and they will help you with any questions. Thank you, and William, back to you.
Yes, and again, thank you, Cindy, and thank you to our audience. And that Cindy mentioned, I do want to say to the audience, please, if you do have any questions that weren't answered today, please do contact the response center. Their information is indeed on this slide, in the slide deck, and located here for you as well. So thank you again, Cindy, for a wonderful presentation. Before we wrap up, I do just have a few quick announcements to everyone, just to keep in mind. Please note that you all can stay in touch with OJJDP's INTAC by following us on Facebook or joining our listserv. Multiple ways you can join our listserv here. Please feel free to note this information here if you're interested in staying up to date on the latest with all information that we have with INTAC. Another thing, if you all are interested in actually contacting OJJDP, please feel free to reach out to the help desk. I know we've put the help desk information in the chat box multiple times for you all, and so that information is again here. So any questions that you all have related to this solicitation, related to anything else, as far as any handouts that you may have had trouble downloading or anything related to just OJJDP in general, please contact OJJDP at this information on this slide. Do you have a training or a technical assistance need? Well, if so, please be sure to submit a request via OJJDP's TTA 360 platform. The URL to access that platform is located here on this slide. Just as a reminder to our audience, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be placed on our YouTube channel. The information and the URL link to get to the YouTube page is located on this slide, as well as any type of materials related to webinars that we've posted in the past. All of that can be obtained by contacting, of course, the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. Please note that we do have a couple of other additional events coming up soon, including another grant solicitation coming up for March the 20th and also 26th. So please be advised for these solicitation opportunities that we do have coming up. These links on this slide are live and ready for you all to select and to register. The same with a couple of other events that we have coming up in April and May. These links are live and available for you all to click on and register for these respective webinars. You can also select Learn More to learn more, of course, about each of the webinars that we have here. And finally, for those that we have left, we do want to know, how do you plan to apply the information that you received from this webinar?